You ever been to a good funeral? Yeah, isn't that weird to kind of figure out like it seems like an oxymoron to have a good funeral, but I'll never forget a good friend of mine, Larry Landreth, back in Michigan. His grandfather passed away, and I knew that he was very, very dear to Larry, so I went to the funeral just to support him and encourage him through that time. And I'll never forget, I walked into the funeral home, and there were 3 funerals going on at the same time, and so they had little arrows going on. And when I walked in, I stood by the little sign. There was this one room that there was just all this buzz sound going on. As I watched the arrows, it pointed me to Lawrence Landreth, and I walked over there, and I opened the door, and the sound just exploded out of there. I mean, people were laughing, and joking around, hugging each other. They all had drinks, it was just like a big cocktail party going on. And I remember I walked in there, and I'm like, this has got to be the wrong place. This is supposed to be a funeral, right? This is when we all wear black and are really sad. And so we sat down, and I'll never forget this moment as long as I live, as person after person after person got up and shared about the life that Lawrence Landreth had lived. And people's lives were completely changed because of this one man. And as I sat there and I watched it, I just thought, well, no wonder this thing was a party. This was an absolute celebration of a life, one life that was lived. And what's interesting, you guys, is like what we want to talk about today is this whole idea that when someone jumps in, I was just at my mother-in-law's yesterday out in Colorado, and we were taking a hike up in the mountains, and there's this little lake by her. And all of a sudden we heard her say, hey, did you see that fish jump? And we're like, no, we didn't see it. But we looked over at the lake, and what did we see? Vroom, 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 right? The ripples they just start. And it's so cool when you watch a ripple. Just a stone can go boom, and it just like it never ends. And you know what, you guys? You have one life. One life. And you know what Lawrence Landreth did? He jumped in, man. He jumped into the pond of life and just caused these ripple effects that were completely changing the world. That's what he was doing. The other great funeral that I was at was my mom's. And it was an incredible moment. And it was a lot of joy. I remember actually when my brothers and sisters and I, my dad, we were all standing back at the church with the casket and ready to roll it down. And we were all joking, just kind of enjoying my mom's life. And we were sitting there talking about the golf outing. We actually go, yep, Mom just shot another 18 today. 18 holes in one. That's what my mom would have done up in heaven. We were just, and so we said that we just started joking and laughing as we walked down the aisle with her casket. I actually wrote a song and sang it and played it for her at her funeral. And by the grace of God, I got through it. I mean, as soon as I hit that last note, just the tears just exploded out of me. Because my mom was the most amazing person, to me personally, but to all of us. And I'll never forget there, sitting there in that pew and watching again person after person get up and just share how my mom had impacted their life. See, there are really good funerals. And it's a pretty amazing experience. The one thing, though, about my mom that all of us always said, all of my brothers and sisters, is like, you know what we lost? We just lost our biggest cheerleader. We lost the person who thought we could do anything, or at least she convinced us of that fact, whether it was true or not. She made us feel like $1 million. And so the reason that we wanted to do this today was this. Why is it that we wait until someone is dead to tell them how awesome we think they are? Isn't that the weirdest thing? Hey, when you're not around so you can't hear it, then I'll tell you how wonderful I think you are. And what happens, right? You weep and you cry because you missed it. You missed the opportunity. Oh, I wish I could have told that to you face to face. You know what's interesting about the word encourage? I was in our drive back from Colorado just last night. I was thinking about this, and I've never thought about this before. When I think of encourage, I think of lift up and build up and all that kind of stuff. But actually think about the word. What does encourage mean? You know what it means? I went back and looked it up. The history of the word, what it means is to give courage. It means you put in courage to people. And then obviously, what does discourage mean? Dis means away. And you can discourage people, and you can completely take away their courage. And when I thought about that, I go, that is so true. And what I was hoping would happen today, what we were hoping as we planned the service, if you were one of those that got eulogized today, is that you might actually, when we encourage somebody, what we can do is actually give them strength and encourage to go for it and to live the life that you're created to live. And unfortunately, in this world, we are surrounded by what? Discouragement. I mean, it's all around us. People have so many comments to make, and they just sap it right away, and you lose your courage to really live. And many of us instead live these lives of fear. And you know what's interesting? When you're living a life of fear, if you really stop and think about it, you're living a life that's centered around yourself, and you're trying to protect yourself from those things. But if you live a life of courage, then that means that you're living for something greater. And what I'm hoping to do today, you guys, is this. I want to encourage you today to examine the legacy that you're leaving right now. If this was your day, because our days are numbered, right? If this was your day, what would be your legacy? And if we could stop today and think about, this is what I'm leaving, this is the ripple effect that I'm going to have on generations to come. What is that going to be? And then what I'm really hoping today can happen, to give you courage to go for it. And I'm telling you, to no longer live for yourself, but to live for Him and to live for the people that God has placed you around in your life, that we would go for it. Because I'm telling you, every single one of you got to remember this. He knit you together in your mother's womb. And and the scriptures tell us that when He knit you together, every day was ordained for you before one of them came to be. He has a plan for you, and your life matters, and it really does impact those around you. And so today, I have this phrase that just hit me over and over again, and this is what we got to believe today, and that's this. What you say and what you do changes the world. And I'm telling you, as many of you sit here today and you feel so insignificant and you feel like maybe your life doesn't matter. Can I just ask real quick, how many of you are parents in here? Everybody who's a parent, keep your hand up, raise it up, and have it up there. Okay, you can put them down. Now you know, right? If you're a parent, automatically, without choice, you don't even get to sign up for this one. Without choice, you are the biggest influence on your children. You just are. And what you do and what you say completely changes their world. And on the flip side, what you don't do and what you don't say completely changes their world. But it's not just kids, you guys. When you leave this world, you will leave many people behind. Whenever you're at a funeral, who shows up? Other family members show up, co-workers show up, friends show up. You have a sphere of influence that is yours, that God has placed you in. And I want to tell you right now, you're in that world to jump in with both feet and cause a cannonball splash. Just and cause ripples to last throughout eternity. Because what you do and what you say does change the world. And what you don't do and what you don't say, unfortunately, changes the world. And that's what we're going to look at today. So, before we do, we got to pray. Because here's the deal again, you guys, right? Why are we here today? Why do we even have a Sunday morning service for an hour and 15 minutes? The whole reason we gather here today is because we really do believe that the God who does know you, who did knit you together, and has placed you where He has you, He knows you right now, and He knows what you need to hear today. He knows, the scriptures say, do you know that God gives endurance and God gives encouragement? He is the one, I think, who can give us the courage today to live the life that you're meant to live. So let's pray right now, right? Let's not go to church today, okay? Let's not just come here and, knock it off our belt that we went to church. Let's actually believe that the living God in us, that you can engage with Him right now. If you'll open your heart to Him, as Jesus said, if you'll have ears to hear, He's got stuff to say to us today. All right? So let's pray together. Father, thank you so much. Again, this service, I thank you that our lives are significant. It is so scary. It's really scary to know that what we do and what we say actually changes the world. And at the same time, God, it makes us realize we matter. mean, we're not just an accident down here whose life doesn't have any impact. There's not a soul in this room right now that wasn't perfectly thought together by you. And they live right now in this place at this time for a reason. And God, we believe, we want to believe, and we want to walk out of this place encouraged, with courage to live the life that you've called us to live. Would you help us to see how influential our lives are, and help us, God, by your grace and by your mercy, to actually live them in a way that blesses those around us and brings you honor. And we pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to go back to Judges. And if you guys were here just a few weeks ago, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I taught from Judges as well, chapter 2. I'm actually going to just keep going right in chapter 2. And this is the last week in this series that Andy and I have been doing, just calling Take a Look at Your Legacy. And they've just been 5 weeks that have come from the scriptures of just certain passages that have really meant a lot to us. And again, what happened was just a few months ago, I was reading this passage in Judges. And as soon as I read it, it was just so... I'm not sure what the right word is. I think haunting. This is a haunting passage to me. And it really has impacted me strongly. And so I just wanted to share this with you. So I do need to give you a little bit of history to make sure you understand why this passage is so critical. So I'm going to try to do this as quick as I can. But in Genesis, you've got Abraham, right? Abraham is the first guy that God comes to, and he says he chooses him. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. And I'm going to lead you into a land that is yours. It's going to be for your descendants. It's a promised land. And so Abraham gets this covenant with God that there's going to be a land that's for his people, right? And then Abraham has Isaac, and Isaac has Jacob, and Jacob's name actually gets turned into Israel. And we have the Israelites that we know of today, right? And so the Israelites happen, and one of the Israelites' son is Joseph. And Joseph, I'm trying to go really quick here with this history of the whole Old Testament. You guys ready? But what happens is Joseph actually gets thrown into slavery by his other brothers, gets taken into Egypt, and eventually becomes the ruler over Egypt, second to Pharaoh. And he helps save the people from this famine. His other brothers come to him, right? And say they don't even know it's him, but eventually everybody gets to know each other. It's all happy. This is so fast. This is really bad. But basically what happens is all of the Israelites end up in Egypt. Next thing you know, they're in slavery to the Egyptians. And then comes Moses. And Moses gets called by God to come and let my people go, right? And so Moses comes in and he tells Pharaoh to let my people go, and he won't do it. And you have this miraculous thing, unbelievable story. When you read the Psalms and the whole Israelite history, it's so much about this exodus that took place where God set his people free. Why? Because he promised them, I have a land for you. So Moses leads them into the desert. Everybody complains and moans, and he says, that's enough of you. You all die. Next generation rises up, and then Moses doesn't even get to go. Joshua hops onto the scene. He leads the people into the promised land. Joshua is a great book, man. In fact, we're going to do a series on it this fall, and we're going to look at the first 4 chapters of Joshua. Unbelievable story. And then you get to Judges. And as I said before, horrible book. Absolutely horrible. It's just so sad what happens in this book. Because Joshua leads his people in. They get there, and then I'm going to take it from Judges chapter 2, starting with verse 6. After Joshua had dismissed the Israelites, they went to take possession of the land, each to his own inheritance. The people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Now, can you imagine that funeral? Can you imagine what that was like to show up to Joshua's funeral? I mean, a guy who led the people and lived righteously and was able to do what God asked him to do. Man, that would have been an awesome funeral. And then verse 10. After that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and they served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped various gods of the peoples around them, and they provoked the Lord to anger because they forsook him, and they served Baal and the Ashtoreths. Did you guys catch this? I'm reading the story, and I get to this point, and I just put the Bible down, and I go, wait a second now. This doesn't make any sense to me. This is a really screwy passage to me. I don't get how you can have this whole generation. You have Joshua, this great leader, and while he leads, what's it say? The people serve the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua. Awesome. So he's doing a great job. He's leading. Everybody's following. They're serving the Lord. And then it says, the people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him, who had seen all the great things that the Lord had done for Israel. So Joshua dies. The elders are hanging on, and they're doing a good job, right? And the people are still serving him. And then the very next generation, their kids, grow up. And it says what? After that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. There's a big disconnect here for me. Wait a second. So you got one generation. They're going to like K2 every week, right? And they're in small groups and they're serving up on the Adventure Canyon and the band and all this kind of stuff. They're actually faithful and everything's okay. And then the very next generation grows up and they don't know the Lord and they have no idea what he had done. Do you guys see the disconnect here? And I just want to go, how in the world did that happen? Because if it happened then, could it happen now? Now, if you're a parent, that should send chills up your spine. That's what happened to me. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, wait a second. You mean somehow it's possible that maybe I could actually serve the Lord and the very next generation might not even know who he is and not even know what he had done? That just floors me and it scares me. It really scares me. Because come on, you guys, think about this. If the very next generation 3,000 years ago couldn't handle the temptation, do you think there's just a little bit more temptation out there today than what they were experiencing? You guys looked at the internet lately? I mean, have you seen what's around there constantly alluring us to what? What happened to the next generation? It says that they started to worship the gods of the people. I'm telling you, man, right now, in this day and age, we are constantly being allured to worship the gods of the people, the gods who are not the one true God, but to give our lives to things that don't really matter. And our kids are getting it way worse than we ever did. I mean, it's unbelievable to me what's happening here. So I looked at this and I just said, well, what are the possibilities? Because obviously, what you say and what you do changes the world. And what you don't do and what you don't say changes the world. Because the world of the Israelite nation changed in one generation. So something was going on here. Either they were doing something wrong or they weren't doing something right. And I especially am concerned about this because have you guys ever seen Pastors' Kids? Anybody? Yeah, apparently not many of you. Because Pastors' Kids, and I was talking to somebody else about missionary kids. Missionary kids and pastors' kids. I went to Asbury College, this little Christian school in Wilmore, Kentucky, surrounded by pastors' kids and missionary kids. And I was neither, right? I was a phys ed kid. And so I walk into this world, and all of a sudden I learn something about pastors' kids and missionary kids. They are either the most unbelievable, loving, giving, faith-filled people, or they are straight from hell. And I want to tell you right now, being a pastor and having kids scares the living bejeebies out of me. Because I do know this. I feel like there's probably not much chance for Mariah, Ashlyn, and Caleb to be middle of the road. I think they're either going to love God and love Christ with all their heart, or they're going to totally bail on him. That scares me. And you know what? When I thought about that, and the kids I knew who were PKs and MKs, which is what we called them, is that partly what happened was they saw their parents be super religious around all the people, And then at home, they didn't live it out at all. And man, when there was hypocrisy, they bailed. They weren't going to do it, man. You know what the other biggest thing was? Is they simply just weren't loved. The church was more important. They were serving, they were doing all this religious stuff, but the family wasn't gaining the full acceptance and the full love that they should have. Now, let's not go with just PKs and MKs, because this is true for all of us, you guys. You're here at church, right? What kind of impact are we going to have? And I just thought, what are some other possibilities? Maybe the kids never got any real instruction. Maybe they just never had real time spent with them, and there was no intentionality to pass it on. Because when I look at this, what happened here in Judges, I can't help but think that somehow they didn't hear it. And somehow they didn't see it. Because it just wasn't even real to them. And they didn't even know what God had done. So, how about you and me? How about us? What's our legacy going to be? What's going to be true of this next generation? What's going to be true of the people when you're laying in the casket who are survivors? You know, the ones who, in the script, right in the newspaper, they're survived by. See, because here it is too. Let me just make this clear. It's not just about our kids. You're going to have a lot of other people who are going to survive you after you die. Your coworkers are going to show up to your funeral. Your friends are going to show up to your funeral, maybe your neighbors, and your other family members. And my question is for me and for you is what's going to be the legacy? What's the ripple? Because what you do and what you say is going to change the world. God, please, please, please believe me. What you don't say and what you don't do is going to change the world. We buy this lie that our lives don't really matter, and it is so not true. We affect everybody that we come into contact with every day. And then the ones that we're around almost every day, our kids and our spouse and the coworkers and your fellow students at your school. You are leaving a legacy. In one generation, they lost it. I'm telling you, man. Do you guys know we're making history right now? We're making it right now. We are leaving a legacy right now. We're creating it right now. Now, so the question is, how can we make sure that our legacy will continue on and flourish and not end with us? So, here's what you got to do. You look back and you go to Deuteronomy, okay? Judges, 7th book in the Bible, Deuteronomy, the 5th book. In here, what we've got is Moses. And Moses is talking to his people. This is what's so cool about the Bible when you see this story. Hundreds of years before the Israelites actually go in, Moses already has some things he wants to tell them. And the first thing he says is in chapter 5, he goes, hey guys, just want to remind you of the 10 Commandments, okay? Remember? That was a really cool moment. Remember that one? I went up to the mountain, right? Smoke filled over the sky. God actually wrote stuff down on tablets. Really cool. And so when I came down, I gave you these 10 things, and I just want to remind you of these. And this is what he says in chapter 6, verse 1. Because before I read this, remember this. What you do and what you say is going to change the world. So he says, these are the commands and decrees and laws that the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You guys are going to go possess this land. And no, so God gave you these decrees and these laws so that you actually would observe them in this land. So that, and here you go, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, O Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. I'm telling you, one of the worst things you can do is drive home 6 hours from Colorado the night before you have to preach. Because you sit there and you talk with your wife about your life. You all can just go home, because I've had this message with myself all night long. And I just go, what are you doing, David? Andy's message last week has just been haunting me. He got done, and I just sat there with my little program, took my notes. And my last thing down there was just, David, what really matters? You remember last week's message? If you have faith, it's based on what you do. And I just thought, oh my goodness, what if I never preached a message, wasn't a pastor? What would people say is true of my life just by what I do? Because what I do or what I don't do is going to change the world. And it's true with my kids. It scares the out of me. Deuteronomy says what? I taught you these things so you would observe them, because then you and your children and their children will fear the Lord. Oh, that's what I want. So keep his decrees and his commands. Be careful to obey him. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. I'm telling you, if that doesn't convict you, it convicts me. Yes, I love him. Do I love him like that? In other words, what are my kids seeing? Right? What are they seeing? What are you doing and they're watching? Because I'm telling you, if you live this stuff out, your kids will see it, and then they'll know it, and then they'll have a chance to say, well, I know it's true because I just saw it. My mom and my dad, they just lived it. I can't deny that. Darn it. I want to go do other stuff, but that was real. Because what you do changes the world. So I was thinking about Jesus, because you got to take the Old Testament and always look at the New Testament. Now, how'd Jesus do at leaving a legacy? He do okay? Yeah, he was all right. Why? Because when he washed his disciples' feet, right when he did that, he said, what? Now, you call me Lord and teacher, and that's right. But now, I have left you an example so that you may go and do just as I have done for you. See, he was doing it all the time. And so they knew what to do. He said, love each other as I have loved you. See, they knew how to love because they knew what love was, because they were loved. Jesus could actually say, go and love each other the way I loved you. Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? To be able to say that to your kids, to be able to say that to your coworkers and your neighbors. Hey, I just got to tell you, one thing you know at least this, I loved you. And if you would just go love people the way I loved you, that'd be amazing. Paul said, follow my example as I followed the example of Christ. And when he was pouring into this young pastor, Timothy, he said, come on, Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. Come on. All of you sitting in here, sorry, but you teenagers and college students, people in your 20s, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. But set an example in speech and in your life and in love and in faith and in purity. You know what's going to happen. I tell you why the ride home was so bad yesterday is because I just started looking at my kids. And I'm like, oh, they just so frustrate me. And then you know what hit me? You know what frustrates me about my kids? It's everything I am. Anybody else relate to that? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the stuff that ticks me off when I look in the mirror. They're getting it. They're getting it. Yeah, they watch what I do, and they do it well. And it's very frustrating. And I realize this is not just my kids, but it's the other people that I spend a lot of time with. I am who I am, not just because of my mom and dad, but I also am who I am because of the people I spent regular time with in my life, and they've impacted me. Some good and some bad. Because what you do changes the world. And what you don't do changes the world. And I can't help but think that somehow these Israelites and judges, right after Joshua and the elders died, somehow they weren't doing it. And their kids got it. And they took it to a whole nother level. And they completely forsook God. So you got to do it. But then check this out. Going back to Deuteronomy, after he says you got to do these things, he says what? Verse 7? Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. In other words, talk about it like all the time. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. You guys ready? We have actually a branding service afterwards. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. I'm telling you guys, what Moses is saying is here, this is the most important thing you will ever do. And when you stand before God, yeah, you're going to be in your funeral and you're laying in the casket and everybody's having a nice funeral down here weeping. And then what? You're standing before God. 2 Corinthians 5:10. You're going to be at the judgment seat of Christ. And you will be judged according to what you have done on this earth. And I think about this, and I just go, wait a second. What am I saying here? I think what Moses is saying is this is the most important thing. Do your kids hear it? Because what you say and what you don't say is changing the world. Do your coworkers hear it? Do your neighbors hear it? Oh, God, what's going on? What are we doing? That's my message to me. What am I doing? What kind of life do I want to live? And then I just thought the first thing that has to happen, because some of you sit there and you go, oh my gosh. Well, the scariest thing to me would be to go home and try to talk to my kids about Jesus. Don't raise your hands, but does that not freak you out? You know why I think? It's partly because you don't know what to say. And don't raise your hand, but anybody relate to that? I got to be so honest with you. I went to seminary. Whew. I know some stuff. I'm supposed to be able to teach you guys. You know what the hardest thing for me to do? The hardest thing for me to do is spend regular time with my kids teaching them. Partly it is, it didn't happen for me. It's new to me. I never had it done. They didn't teach me that in seminary, And I know some of you probably feel the same way. I hear my kids in the back of the van and they'll share this unbelievable stuff and I'll go, wow, how'd you know that? Oh, Adventure Canyon. So, well, thank you, all of you who teach at Adventure Canyon. Where'd you learn that one? Oh, at school? Oh, great. I got to get to the point where I go, where did you hear that? And they can say, you taught me that, Daddy. And I just want to say, first of all, the first thing that needs to happen, you guys, is do you know what to say? I know what to say, so that's not my issue. But my question for you is, do you know what to say? And I think a lot of you would say, I don't know. Well, then you know what has to happen? The first and most important thing is your own personal growth in Christ. If you don't have words to say to your kids, then they aren't going to hear them from you. And then I don't know. And so this right here, showing up on Sunday, right? To be encouraged and to grow. This is very, very important. And don't give up. And Hebrews says, don't give up meeting as some are in the habit of doing. Don't do that. So be here and grow personally. But we've told you a million times, if this hour for your week is the only thing you're getting, there's no way you will ever gain what you need for this next generation. And so that's why we do our small groups that are available. We're going to kick off a whole nother round of them this fall. Please, please, please consider growing spiritually, personally. Please. For the next generation, please. Please. Don't lay in your casket or in your deathbed before you go with thoughts like, oh, I don't know if they ever heard it. I don't know if they saw it. It's not worth it, you guys. One life. So we'll have small groups galore available for you to personally grow spiritually. But then you guys, again, we've been trying to hammer this. The most important thing that you can do is personally open this puppy up and let God speak to you. He knows you. He knows what he wants to say to you. He loves you. He loves your children. He loves your whole sphere of influence, and he wants to be so alive in you. This message even came out of my time just sitting in my backyard, just reading Judges. And God came and he said, David, what are you doing? What are you saying? What kind of legacy are you going to leave? We got to get into this thing, you guys. And I want to tell you, this is hard. Because I don't know how to do this, one of the things I did is I just went down to Hooters Book and Bible, right there on 72nd. So, all right, come on, work with me. All right. That's what us pastors call it anyway. So, but went to the Christian bookstore right there on 72nd, and I walk in there, and I just comb the aisles, and I find this really cool devotional called God and Me. And there's one for girls 2 to 5 years old, and there's one for girls from 6 to 8. And I grab those, and now what we do is we sit with our girls, and we open these up, and they can't wait. They were so excited to have their own devotional, because the one thing they do see, the one thing at least my kids do see, is Susan and I, almost every morning, the first thing, and we always tell them, first thing of first importance is Jesus. So now they've got their devotional, and they love to do it with us. And what it does is you can get this stuff. It's good. And then it's feeding us, and it's helping us to pour into our kids. They got them for boys. They got them for girls. Just go down there and pick up a tool. If you need tools, then grab them. The other thing you've got to do is time. And I know, this is where you hate your flesh, and you hate the selfishness, and you come home from work, and you're tired, and you don't want to deal with it, and you just want to, your kids need your time. My kids need my time. And then you got to take advantage of the moments. Because it's not just about, again, 5-10 minutes here in a devotional, but it's every moment. It's Ashlyn last night just freaking out from a nightmare, right? And being awake and crawling in bed. And it's at those moments, taking advantage of those to bring God into her life right where she's at. We need to take advantage of those times. Because what we do and what we say is going to change the world. And what we don't do and what we don't say, let not history repeat itself, you guys. One generation later, completely forsook the Lord because they didn't know him and they didn't even know what he had done. And I don't know. Somebody said, man, you were really passionate today. I'm like, well, you know what? When you're living it, it's pretty easy to be passionate about it. And I'm in it with you. And I just want to say, will you join me this year? And quit playing the freaking game of going after the gods of the people. Because my temptation is the same as yours. We all want more stuff, and we all want to be a little more comfortable, and we all want to do stuff that's for ourselves, and in the meantime, we're not passing it on, and they don't see it in us. I say, let's make sure they see it, and let's make sure that they hear it. Can I say something really important as I close? So important. The only thing you can do is do it, live it, and say it. You cannot make it happen. I hate that. I hate the fact that whether Mariah and Ashlyn and Caleb have faith in God and live for him is out of my control. So you all need to know that. See, the scriptures say we can plant and we can water, but we can't make anything grow. But I can tell you this, if it's not planted and if it's not watered, it certainly will not grow. So what we get to do with our children and what we get to do with our coworkers and with our schoolmates, what we get to do is toil the soil. We get to plant the seeds. We get to say things. We get to live in such a way that they get to see it. Now, whether it takes root or not, unfortunately, is up to God. Well, that was really bad. Shouldn't have said that. It's up to God. And he's the one who works because every one of us, every one of you has a choice. to receive that and respond to it. So don't try to make it happen because you can't. But just make sure, for me, I just want to make sure when I'm dead, at my funeral, hopefully there won't be anybody sitting there who would say, especially my kids, who wouldn't say, I didn't see it, and I didn't hear it. And that, you can make sure, never happens. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to close today, and I know a lot of you hate this, but that's okay. Is we just felt like it wasn't right to just sing songs today to close the service. Because what worship is, worshiping God is when He is everything to you, and you respond to Him with a glad heart and a willing heart, and you obey Him. So what we want to do is we want to give you a chance to just engage with Him. Again, we don't want to do the church thing. Really engage with God here today. And how we're going to do that is our greeters are going to come forward. And I did this exercise. Maybe some of you have done it. Stephen Covey had it in his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And what you do is, he says, close your eyes and imagine yourself walking into a funeral. Imagine the sound, the flowers, the smells. You walk up to the casket, you look inside, and it's you. And you actually get to attend your own funeral. And so then what he does is he says, now what you need to do is think about every role that you have as a person. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend, I'm a pastor, all those things. And then you imagine those people getting up. So Susie gets up at my funeral, and I'm sitting there. And then what he says to do is, you write down what you want her to say. And you get to write down what you want her to say. Your kids get up at your funeral, and you get to write down what your kids would say. I'm telling you guys, this is the most phenomenal exercise that I've ever done for me personally. And what we want you to do here today is this. I want you to think about who is it that God has seemed to place in your life that is it's the person that you most influence. It's the person that you rub shoulders with on a daily basis. It could be a coworker. It could be a friend. It could be a family member. It could be your children. Whatever. It could be your spouse. But what I want you to do is I want you to take this piece of paper. There was a pen on your chair. And I want you to imagine that you're at your own funeral and this person gets to stand up and you write down what you want them to say at your funeral. So do that with one person, and then the second person that I want you to do it with, who gets to attend your funeral, is Jesus. If Jesus Christ came up behind the podium and he got to talk about your life in front of everybody, and he knows everything, what would you want Jesus Christ to say about your life? So we're going to give you some time to do that, okay? So go ahead and just take your pen and your paper, write about one person that you influence, what you want them to say, and then what would you want Jesus Christ to say at your funeral?